Hi guys, today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the symptoms that you may experience when you come out of a relationship with a cluster B, which is a narcissist, psychopath, sociopath, or a borderline personality disorder. Or it can also manifest if you're coming out of a relationship with somebody who's actively addicted and having quite narcissistic behaviors. So, some of the things that you may experience is a lot of people report having hypervigilance, where they feel, anxiety, fear, even some, possibly some paranoia, terror. A lot of times they have insomnia, feelings of, restlessness, irritability, discontent. Like these are all, possible symptoms of the hyper arousal state. Another manifestation of it could be the hypo arousal, where you're listless, you're depressed, the things that used to bring you joy, you don't feel the same about them anymore, you have low motivation, you may be having, in both cases, you might be having flashbacks, perseverations, where it's really hard to get off of the thinking about, the narcissist or psychopath. You may have a sort of racing thoughts. So these are all really common. They're all reported in the literature, in the psychological literature. They're also reported anecdotally by a lot of the survivors. So these are symptoms of complex PTSD that you may be experiencing. Whether you have a diagnosable condition of PTSD or not, that's somewhat irrelevant in that it's sort of a level of severity that you may just have, some of these symptoms, and these are really common. And, what I'm going to talk about today is, some of the things that you can do to treat them and to overcome your symptoms of CPT, complex PTSD, if you are experiencing it. One thing is, obviously when you're dealing with the cluster B, no contact is the first step towards recovery, because, you really need to, sort of eradicate this sort of toxic person from your life. I recommend no contact in the form of, the phone, internet, mutual friends, unless the friends are supportive and understand that you've been abused and you're a survivor and they can validate that. People that don't validate that, they're considered flying monkeys. They're people that are validating the abuser, whether they do it knowingly or unknowingly. Either way, they're probably not the people that you need to surround yourself with. So in general, you may need to go no contact with the family, with the mutual friends, just to, give yourself some space to heal, and certainly no contact with the abuser, because they are going to keep trying often, not always. Sometimes they just go away. If they're more full-blown sociopath or psychopath, then they may just go away. But if they're a narcissist, they may keep coming back to see if they can continue eating your food, your emotions, because remember, they feed on other people's emotions. Oftentimes, especially if you're dealing with a covert narcissist, they act like they don't need people, like they're an island, but they actually require people to help them validate their existence, because internally they are really empty inside. So they actually have an addiction to approval and to flattery and to validation from outside sources. They may do it in a very cunning sort of, under the radar sort of way. Often with a covert narcissist, they act very self-depreciating, but in fact, they think they're very grandiose in their ideology. But for you to get out, so no contact's very important. You're going to go through likely a phase where you're reading a lot about narcissism. You're trying to understand what just happened, especially if you were at the covert, because the gap between who you thought they were and the mask that they presented and who you found them out to be can be quite large. It can be basically a chasm. And so there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that can come along with that realization. So you're going to you may go through these stages, and you're going to probably do a lot of research to understand narcissism. That's part of the process. But at some point, you're going to reach over to the other side of researching about the narcissist and really start to look at yourself and do the work that you need to do to heal your codependence and your lack of boundaries, or as Ross Rosenberg, the psychologist expert on narcissism and cluster B, he calls it your self-love deficit disorder. And it's what allowed you to stay in a relationship with a psychological or physical abuser and keep making excuses for their bad behavior rather than actually just getting yourself out of that situation. Usually that goes back to your childhood trauma and neglect, where you got used to being mistreated. So this was just par for the course, if that makes sense. So there's some really good books out there. This is one that I really recommend. It's called The PTSD Solution, and there's a workbook that accompanies it, and it is how to sort of start working on overcoming your complex PTSD. Other treatment modalities that I think are really helpful, they've been really helpful for me, are EMDR therapy, where you are learning to reprogram your brain. There's also a course by Dr. Freeman, and it's from the Neuro Instincts Academy, and she helps you to guide you through overcoming these narcissistically, psychopathically abusive relationships by using neuroscience. And she has a lot of meditations as well as understanding actually what's happening in your brain and body when you've been subjected to the behaviors that can cause or lead to complex PTSD. Another treatment that I'm currently doing that I find actually quite helpful is called TMS. It's transcranial magnetic stimulation. And it's sort of similar to electric shock therapy, which they say is actually the most, therapists say it's actually the most effective form of to treat severe clinical depression. But that's electric shock therapy. But this is TMS, and TMS is like that, except for it doesn't have the memory loss side effects. It's very relatively benign. It's pretty expensive. So in my case, I got into a local study where it's free for me, so I feel very grateful. And basically, they're using magnets sort of on your brain to sort of restart your synapses and sort of help you to rewire those neural pathways that have been created, the grooves that have been created in this toxically abusive relationship. So they have it actually for depression as well, because you may have the comorbidity of depression. Some people choose to get on sort of a low-grade antidepressant. I have not opted for that just because I'm in recovery and I'm trying to be very careful about what sort of chemicals I allow into my body. But I've done EMDR, I've done somatic body work, yoga, the TMS, cognitive behavioral therapy, and then there's a lot of great healing books. Another one by Jackson McKenzie. He wrote the book Psychopath Free, that will really help you to understand a cluster B and what you were dealing with, and know that it's not your fault. You just got with somebody who's toxic and you didn't know it, you didn't see it, you were being manipulated, gaslit, lied to. They all lead double lives and you probably had no idea. Or to the extent, because you can't really fathom, neurotypical can't really fathom having a brain like this and having no conscience or impaired conscience and a lack of empathy and no remorse. These are not normal for normal people, so it's really hard for people to wrap their head around this sort of a disturbed character. They call it, a predator really is what you were dealing with. Whether that predator was a wolf in sheep's clothing, which can be the case, especially if you're dealing with a high-level covert narcissist or a sociopath. They can look really nice on the onset and be really duplicitous internally, and very dangerous for people that get into very close interpersonal relationships with them. Possibly on a tertiary level, they're okay, but if you get into any sort of close relationship, you're probably going to be in trouble. Psychopath Free by Jackson McKenzie is a really good book. And then the second follow-up book, I really, really am getting a lot out of it. It's called Whole Again. And it's all about moving past that sort of perseveration, that obsession, which is very, very normal if you're coming out of one of these relationships, because you have no idea. You're trying to figure out what the heck just happened to you. But the second book, Whole Again, is excellent because it teaches you how to heal and accept what may have led you to be in this sort of relationship in the first place with a personality disordered individual, and then to do a lot of your own healing and growth around that so that you never find yourself in one of these situations again. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I've gotten a lot of good positive feedback on these videos, so I'm just trying to put the word out there and educate, sort of share my personal journey and educate you as well as I can from what I have learned and how it's benefited me. So hope you have a really good day. Bye.